Living Heritage is designed to highlight, examine, and celebrate elements of the rich cultural heritage of St. Kitts and Nevis. Journey with us as we explore our distinct and immersive culture. Welcome to a life of pride in our past and confidence in our present and future. Welcome to Living Heritage. Today's Living Heritage, our ICH mini-documentary series of St. Kitts and Nevis, will showcase the ICH domains of performing arts and oral traditions. Our traditional knowledge bearer weaves his tales through his songs and performances. Today's element is Calypso, and our TKB has won the St. Kitts and Nevis National Carnival crown 6 times and has won the Leeward Islands Calypso competition. He not only writes his own compositions, but he continuously writes for others. Our TKB today is Sylvester Socrates Hodge. Listen as he tells us how he began performing in the arts from an early age and about the association that he has formed to document the history in his hometown of Sandy Point.
Okay, my name is Sylvester Hodge, aka King Socrates in Calypso circles. In terms of my current age, put a 0 behind the 7 and you got 70, born in 1950 and 5. So that's it, 70 years on the planet, and still happy to be here. That goes back to school. School days, primary school days when we were engaged in plays. There was one specific need for someone to show up with a guitar and play. I could not play guitar. I didn't have a guitar. I borrowed one, and over the weekend, I practiced whatever I could learn, and then showed up presenting as a singer, whatever the song was. So that was always part of my mindset, knowing that I have a place on the stage. I could use the instrument, and so I became an instrumentalist over the many years, learning to play the guitar, any number of string instruments or wind instruments. I really apply myself to that. But I'm a natural musician. I've never had formal training. I was given a guitar as a choice between that and a bicycle. I wanted a bicycle for my birthday at that particular time. It's in December. My family mainly migrated to the USVI, so I was in St. Kitts and I wanted a bicycle for my birthday. My mother wrote to my father, and he says, "No, that means traffic. Can you play guitar?" "Yes." And he bought a guitar, came home, sat down, lit a cigarette, and told me to play. I couldn't play. But later on, I had to apply myself. Now, because of the versatility of the guitar, you can take it anywhere, any place at a given time. I applied myself more to that than the keyboard. So at one point in my life, I was a very accomplished and popular bass guitarist for a number of bands in the USVI. So in most of my composition, I always work with a bass line because that makes a difference in the construct of the songs. In terms of Calypso, I recall in the mid-70s, I was known as a writer for many of the other artists of the day, because I was told by a brother of mine, who is an awesome Calypsonian. His name is Malcolm Morgan. He actually became the Calypso King of the College of the USVI back in the day. And I was told by him that I couldn't sing. And so I really believe that, because you have to be careful what you tell people, children. I believe that I really can sing. So I found myself to be good with the pen as a writer, so I went into that. So I can say I have about almost 55 years in the art form, but as a developed Calypsonian, I would say it's in the early 80s that I entered the stage in competition form. So Malcolm Morgan, I was proud of his accomplishments. As a child, I knew he was this Calypsonian in the USVI, etc. But I wasn't really aware of his songs. You know, later on in the, I was 60s, we had what you call a Grandic radio, and the stations of the day would play most of the songs from Trinidad. I may call the name of Lord Melody, Sparrow, and those guys because of the rivalry. So that was my first awareness of Calypso in that format. And so somehow in my psyche, my subconscious, I developed this love for the Calypso art form. So like most folks, you ask them, who was your inspiration and mentors? You look at those songs they wrote, and as a writer, I compared my standard to theirs. And there were songs that people thought was a great song, great composition. I'm thinking, nah, I can do better. So I really knew I had a better act for writing than singing because it was so I couldn't sing. Yes, the average Joe takes the narrative that Calypso was born in Trinidad. That's a fallacy. Calypso is one of the many aspects of African culture that survived the Middle Passage. We can go back to West Africa and look into the traditions of the griots, the oral historians. What they did, they chronicled every aspect of the society: birth, death, marriage, any social event, they chronicled in songs. They were actually traveling troubadours, and you had to be able to accompany yourself with an instrument. So they traveled and they sang, and that is how they carried out the oral history. Slavery has been a major interruption of African culture and development. So transported to the various islands, we end up in the Caribbean. You have so many different tribes, many aspects of the culture. So on the plantations where the drums as a form of communication was banned, separating you by your language so you could not communicate effectively with your fellow men, you humans. You had to create avenues to communicate. You were allowed to sing. So what you did, you sang your songs, but in those songs there were codes, thus the double entendre. And that is how you communicated, from plantation to plantation. So let's say that Calypso in its current form was rebirthed in Trinidad. But then, Mr. Gordon, I forget his first name, he was the lead singer for Gramax, was a band from Dominica. He told me that Calypso was first sung in Dominica before Trinidad. Gabby in Barbados will tell you that they taught Trinidadians how to speak English. So each is claiming, but the fact is what I'm saying, that Calypso was used throughout the region. Context. Back in the day, in the early stage of the Calypso tense, the commercial houses did not support Calypso. It was ostracized, it was persecuted, it was stigmatized as rum shop music, etc. And so the Calypsonians would appear in the bamboo huts, which they created because they didn't have the means to go and rent a space, a commercial space to put on the shows. So they created a bamboo hut, which became the origin of the Calypso tent. And most of the Calypsonians who didn't have good attire, they would share a jacket. The stage would be about maybe 2-3 feet up. They would perform behind it. You won't see the pants, but you see the fancy jacket at the top. And that was taking pride in your work. You couldn't go on stage in just an old t-shirt and this and that. You dress with the part. So maybe 4 or 5 Calypsonians would wear the jackets, just to present, and that aspect of presenting. Because you were not just a Calypsonian, maybe you were not literate or that educated. But the songs that you created more or less dictated or governed policies of government. Because you have the voice of the masses. And whoever have the voice or the ear of the masses can dictate policies. So many government ministers, educated, etc., were forced to listen to the sentiment of the people through the voice of the Calypsonians. It's not lost, but in some societies it's more prominent. It's more prominent. In the writing today, we have more Calypso writers than Calypsonians. There's a difference. Calypsonian, like the griots, he wrote his own songs. He was able to accompany himself with an instrument, etc. We have many artists today who are singers of songs written by others. So unless you want to sing on, say, My Friend in the Red Shirt, and you get pen, paper, guitar, and somebody gives you a song that you may not even like, but you have to try to adapt and sing it, but you don't have that innate feeling from your heart because you didn't create it. But double entendre is still there because, and a lot of songs, if you listen to them, let's take, say, the witty songs. Now, there's a big difference between wit and smut. Okay? Let me take it back a couple of years. I did a song called Salty, Fatty, and Sweet. It's about diabetes. You're not supposed to eat salty, fatty, and sweet. Metaphors. But when I sang it, I took off $50 and it says, can anybody tell me what the song is all about? And the lady jumped up and said, oh, it's about me because I have all three. I'm salty, fatty, and sweet. But you use the double entendre and the humor to get the message out. Rather than being a song that's boring, oh, you're not supposed to, it was couched in humor. And so it was a vehicle that was well received, but metaphorically, yeah, double entendre, yeah. Most of it is smut, and we have a society that is becoming more accepting of those songs. Now, I was in St. Lucia a few weeks ago on two missions, one tourism-based and one, I was trying to create a competition between St. Lucia's top 3 witty Calypsonians and St. Kitts' top 3. And then I'm hoping to get this to be a regional thing, right? I found out from Mallet, a Kittitian living there, he is known as a hammer in Calypso circles, that there are no witty Calypsonians in St. Lucia. I said, but you're the face of it because we've heard his songs. He have a song called Give Me the Meat Just So, blah, 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 and it's very popular. And I thought they would have that in St. Lucia. They don't have that. But I'm still working to get that up and running. Witty, not smutty. Soca is an offspring of Calypso. We will give credit to Lord Shorty I. His first name is, anyway, he's Blackman, that's his title. Ras Shorty I. He is the creator of soca, where he fused the East Indian drums with the African conga, the rhythms, and created that genre. As he called himself a musical scientist, he created soca. And I think it came at a time when Calypso was not too popular. And even though I would say that Ras Shorty I created soca, it was Arrow from Montserrat who took it to the world. To the point that at the stage in the mid-70s, Sharkless criticized him and thought they were bastardizing Calypso and blah, 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 because whereas Calypso is more message-laden, social issue, soca is more up-tempo, more about dance, more about party, and it was easier for the North Americans to tap into that because 90% of the Calypsos in the region relate to local issues or maybe just regional issues. The North American, you can't reach him. But if you go up there now, how you feeling, hot, 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 hey, it's party time. So Arrow, I would think, is more instrumental than taking it out there, even though it was created, invented by Trinidadian in Trinidad. In Trinidad, they bemoaning the fact that the older heads are disappearing. The young ones are not seeing Calypso, etc., etc. But there's hope for that still. But in terms of the financial returns, it's very dismal. Bill Monroe, who was the owner of the Soca Monarch competition in Trinidad, told young Calypsonians, if you want to make money, don't go sing Calypso, sing Soca. And you look at Marshall Montano, look at his success. The writing is okay. Some songs, some topics hit you, and within 24 hours, the song is completed. And you wonder, where did this come from? When's this inspiration? Other times, you're fighting with the topic. As a matter of fact, I just finished writing a song for somebody taking part in the upcoming Culturama festival. It took me 3 songs to get to the one that I really wanted. Because if I'm fighting it, I'm not feeling it. Next day I get up, I'm trying, nah, this is not working. I try the next topic. But sometimes it just comes to you and it flows through you through the pen. So it depends. So I think it's spiritual in terms of how it affects me and how some topics just come from nowhere and transfer to paper. By myself. Sometimes on my morning walks, I get inspiration. Back in the day, I could get a melody, a theme, about 10 in the night. And I hum a few bars, and I go to sleep. Next day, it comes back to me. Now today, no. So I have a little recorder, and I record it, and I go to sleep. So when I'm ready now, I have the call. Back in the day, it would just come naturally, but as you go older, you know your limitations. You respect yourself. Some artists will tell you who their writers are. Some have an issue they don't want to know. But I can say easily the folks I've worked with have no problem with this. Let's take some of the female Calypsonians who have made their mark on the landscape. Let's take my daughter, Queen Anastasia. She would take any topic, and she's got this presence on stage, she just bring it to you. So writing for her is a joy. When I did a song for Anastasia for PM, that took me about maybe 3-4 hours. 3-4 hours, and it was done. Lady Diva, Brown Sugar, Lady B, and quite a number of the female Calypsonians who came into play back in the day. Some of them would have issues with me. I'll leave it up, but I think I've assisted many of the, we have in Nevis now, Empress Lyrics. Last year she was doing well. She had the song, No Godfather, No Crown, and she tells everybody who are writing, so she have no issue with that, right? I mentioned to Jazzy some years ago that I was the author of a song called Seven the Mass. You know, before your time? Monday, the costume lost on the road, Tuesday, yes. And she was surprised. Warm Bikini, a song I wrote for another brother of mine, etc. So I was in the background with a pen all the time. I am still doing so.
We'll be right back with more from King Socrates.
That's what I'm talking about.
Wait! Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to the St. Kitts Craft House. This is where life begins, and what we create will leave you speechless. We train, we create, we promote, and we maintain the highest standards. Experience life for yourself. The premier craft and production facility in St. Kitts and Nevis.
Welcome to the supermarket with Lila and her mom. Lila spots her favorite cookies on the shelf. But she realizes there's no label on the package. No name, no ingredients, nothing at all. Lila remembers the importance of food labels, and that according to the labeling regulation for prepackaged food, all products must be labeled properly. They decide to tell the store manager about it. The manager appreciates Lila's observation. Lila feels proud for helping keep everyone safe. Remember, labels help us shop smarter and safer.
Living Heritage continues as TKB, King Socrates, explains his role in the Sandy Point Heritage Society.
The objective of the Sandy Point Heritage Society, of which I'm the president, was to bring awareness about the history and the contribution of Sandy Point to the development of the not only country but the region, and to create a museum, a place of learning where folks can go and see artifacts and learn about the folks who would have contributed. You would have heard the saying that has been met with much derision, that Sandy Pointers feel they're the best, they're the smartest, and this and that and that and that. That was a fact. Most of the established businessmen in St. Kitts and Bastia came from Sandy Point, namely the Malalus. They came from Sandy Point, right? Whereas Bastia was the capital of French St. Kitts, where our most of the focus is. Sandy Point was the capital of British St. Kitts, right? So Brimstone Hill, now with the boundary now, they've done something with the boundaries. Brimstone Hill is part of Sandy Point, but if you look at the current boundaries, it's shifted. Look at the role that Brimstone Hill played in St. Kitts. There's what we call the Hanson home, what we call the leper home. A lot of folks don't know about it. That was very heavily stigmatized because it was an asylum for the lepers. There was an outcry throughout St. Kitts about the lepers, and there was an issue where it was found that a leper was actually milking cows and selling the milk to the households. And so when they found out, because there was certain stigma, what we call a swab, they would smell it in the milk bottles, and it came from what they used to treat their sores. So the government of the day decided, okay, we have to pick up all the lepers and put them in a place where. So Charles Fort, which was funded by King Charles to build fortification to defend against the French, because there was boundaries, etc. The French was able to defeat the British at Charles Fort. In retaliation, the British put some cannons on the hilltop that overlooked Charles Fort and was able to bombard the French into submission. And that was the birth of Brimstone Hill. So that later on became, for 106 years, from 1896 to 1996, a leper colony which served the region. It was one of the first places in Sandy Point to have a television. So that when they had like sporting events, global events, people would go there to see on television. These folks were well treated. They were a prominent member of a family who made sure that the residents there got everything. Television, the best food, domestic, but the stigma about leprosy. Later on, when some of those folks, because of medical advancement, were able to assimilate in society, we know their names. Phil for flat noses, we saw them, but they were able because there was a cure for leprosy. There's also Downing Street. What comes to mind when you say Downing Street? The residence of the Prime Minister. There was one in Sandy Point that was the British administrative headquarters. The slave market in Sandy Point is the area that we later came to know as the pound, the impound yard. But that was the slave market. Nothing is said or known about that, right? The harbor at Pump Bay, that's where John Newton landed. Who's John Newton? The author of the song Amazing Grace. He landed almost 500 enslaved Africans direct from Senegal to Sandy Point, sold them down there. So all that history, there are folks who will tell you about things that they know, but they're fast disappearing. The last person I interviewed was the late Miss Fritz from Cleverly Hill. She was in her 80s when she passed. I interviewed Miss Charles Mills, the wife of the late Charles Mills, right? I interviewed many of the persons, the information I got from them, right? I interviewed teacher Ann Riven. She's now pushing 104 years old. She was 99 and 100 at the interviews and learned so much from her, which I have, I've posted. So this is information that people need to know about the history. We have a lot of folks from the wider Caribbean moving into Sandy Point who has no affiliation or understand the history of Sandy Point. So this is for them and everybody to understand what Sandy Point meant. I toured a certain church, gave them a tour. We went to the same facility, the Hanson home, and there was, we didn't know this. We didn't know. That's the whole thing about re-educating ourselves about the history. So with Bastia, don't need a lot of introduction. Sandy Point needs that. Thus the Sandy Point Heritage Society. We are, of course, a self-help organization. I would have bought some recording equipment to record the interviews, etc., and share them. But that's the purpose, to share more of our collective history and explain why Sandy Point was thought to be the most educated. Look at St. Johnson Avenue. Look at down the street, Sandy Point. They're identical. The layout and the architecture that was put in place to brain drain Sandy Point. So business people who had a challenge with having to come to Bastia in the morning, they wait until in the evening to catch a truck to go back to Sandy Point. They were then encouraged to move to Bastia. So that talent, at one point all the headmasters of the school in St. Kitts were from, all the PSCs were from. So, oh, you're Sandy Point, I believe I know everything, but there was a reason for that. Sandy Point had the first experiment in comprehensive education in St. Kitts. It was piloted by Mr. Charles Mills. Mr. Bryant, Fitzroy Bryant, was then the Minister of Education. He got the credit. But Sandy Point was the first experiment in comprehensive education. The Sandy Point Boys School. You had the girls' school, which was the church rectory hall. They had the boys' school. That became incorporated. And that produced some stalwarts in education in St. Kitts. So that history is what I tried to put together and get out there. In Sandy Point, we had the mighty Bird. He was a veteran in the US, lived there. He was one of Calypsonians. We had, well, Faye was not really from Sandy Point, but Star Shield, quite a few others, Lord back there from Sandy Point, but they competed in Bastia because this was then the center of the cultural activities. You know, the hard court that's being built was built by Sportax, a group, self-help group that actually built that hard court from their pockets, etc. And I think that court should be named after them. It's called the Sandy Point Hard Court, etc. But in terms of Calypso, we enjoyed the rivalry. You had Keon back in Farncy at the first. We had the village back in Sweeney, and then you had Element from Newtown. Then you had Sargent from Sandy Point before he came to play. That was great. And we have to give a lot of credit to Singh and Jackie for over 50 years battling with the male Calypsonians who were dominant in the tents and in competition. And she's been there, win, lose or draw year after year. We have the credit for that. She is a writer of her own songs. So she is a Calypsonian throughout. Many of the Calypsonians who were assisted back then, female Calypsonians, do not have the ability to write their own songs. So they're still being assisted. So even though the caliber of the songs they present are good, the performance is equal to that of male, they are not the author of their own songs. At the same time, some of the male competitors are not authors of their own songs. But you ask the question about the females. Have they developed? I think a workshop to teach youngsters how to write, how to construct, that's more important. So they can get into the craft of writing, taking topics, building it, going to a competition. I've suggested many times, different platforms, we need to have an inter-school Calypso competition at the primary level. What happens just prior to Carnival, when the kids are focused on their exams, they're told, you need to go and compete. And we write a song for them and they rush them off. And their mothers go on stage and they're so happy to see the kids there. And they bring props on them, but they don't really know what they're doing. You need to have workshops throughout the year, help these kids to develop. You may help them to write this year, look at the songs, and show them how to use the word craft. But teach them how to write their own songs. Teach them about the history and the richness of Calypso and how it relates to our culture as Africans. But I would say my highlights is being able to perform live on BBC, the Wrecking the Studios. There was a fire called the Grenfell Tower Fire about 4 or 5 years ago, the year prior to COVID, I think. And I'd gone in, woke up the night and seen this huge, and one of my friends lived close by to that neighborhood, so I called him, and he said it was in the adjacent tower. But in the same area where we had the parade route, and we have all the Calypso shows, I couldn't go in that environment of mourning and sing a happy song. So I wrote a song called On the Fire, May the Soul Rest in Peace. I performed it. And the newspapers got a wind of it and called me for an interview. Then BBC called. And can you come into the studio? I said, yes, so open my guitar. And I was able to perform it live. And critics who were able to see it, like one person told me, Sylvester Fraser, he said when he saw that, it brought tears to my eyes. So that sense of achievement, where your talent is recognized and appreciated. Not necessarily saying it because I have my crowd, my fan base here, but a king has no honor in his own country. When across the region and on other stages you're recognized and applauded, that's a sense of achievement. In terms of legacy, the Calypso tent has assisted many, many Calypsonians. It was built with Legends tent. It was founded in 2000, so it's 25 years now in existence and has really been a platform for many young, upcoming and female Calypsonians to be able to spread their wings. Sadly, the sponsorship package has dwindled because the other genres have gained momentum over Calypso. We've become seasonal. And I blame the presenters on the radio who think that any foreign material is better than your local material. And they support them and they just leave you on the side. Now, we're Calypso, you're singing that, look at the quality of the material, but if you don't support us, it's a catch-22. It goes around, and that is a problem. So it's hard for a Calypsonian today to see himself on a show in New York, New Orleans, Miami. It's not going to happen. I have a mantra, which is my music is my life, is my music. I live it. I breathe it. There are times I feel a bit depressed. There's something missing. I can't put my finger on it. And then it hits me, bam, you're not creating. So it's embedded in me. Okay? There are times I listen to songs that I say, wait, I really write the song? You understand? I can say that I feel good about the emergence of the female Calypsonian because I've done a lot to give them that platform where they can now stand on their own, express themselves, and compete regionally. I would like to see our junior Calypsonians get to that stage. I would like to see that inter-school competition a reference, get other Calypsonians like myself to teach them. Because sooner or later, I go on south.
We are certain you learned a lot about the importance of the town of Sandy Point, as well as the state of Calypso in St. Kitts and Nevis. Thanks to our Calypso king, Socrates. Keep up to date with our activities by checking us out on Facebook at SKNICH, Instagram at Cultural Heritage SKN, and on YouTube at St. Kitts Culture. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Join us again next week at the same time on Create TV, St. Kitts Cable Channel number 4, and our previously mentioned social media. Until next time, remember, together we can safeguard our living heritage.
Association is an option, and once